Hey everyone, we'll give folks another minute or so to get signed in, and then we'll jump into it. Cool. I am going to get this started since we are looking about half an hour to get into this and kind of get a preview of what's coming in for 2. First, I'd like to say just thank you all for showing up. I know this is kind of the first webinar that we've ever put together prior to a release. We thought this was a really cool opportunity to jump in and talk a little bit about what's coming in 4.2. This is a pretty big release that has some pretty interesting changes to the application that we're pretty excited about, and we hope that you can be as well. Just to introduce myself, I am Tim Randall. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Malili, and I have probably met or worked with most of you over the years when it comes to Blackout. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what 4.2 is. Going to do a quick demo, and then we'll leave about 10-15 minutes at the end for me to answer any questions. I imagine there's going to be some questions about some of these changes that we're putting together. So getting into it, what is Blackout 4.2? And we had a couple pretty ambitious goals for this release. In particular, what we wanted to accomplish with it was pretty lofty. So the first and probably most important change, we have one cannot hear. I think is anyone else able to hear me? Just real quick check. So if the audio is not coming through and you're on the computer audio, you may have to click on the audio section in the GoToMeet, and then there's a drop down. You might have to switch device for that. Cool. So jumping back over, I got some messages, some other folks can hear me. So jumping back over, kind of this biggest change that we wanted to do with 4.2 is we wanted to start introducing a system of always preserving the work product of manual spreadsheet redactions, regardless of whether there's a failure or error or other that takes place. So I would say probably the most important change in this release is that when a reviewer is reviewing a spreadsheet and they place a redaction, we're making sure that's saved out. So even if something goes wrong, the redaction can't be placed, the document fails, or some type of error, there's an interruption, we're going to be caching that redaction off so that down the road, when we correct that bug, we correct that issue, we work with you guys, who work with our support, you'll be able to get that redaction back on there without having to ask your reviewers to go back and do all of that work again. This led us to make some significant changes that resulted in pretty big performance improvements. And to coincide with that, effectively what we've done is we've worked to offload a lot of the things that were happening on your web servers and move that into the agent servers. So when a redaction is being placed, we are basically sending that redaction over to the agent server, letting that get processed there, update the document, save it, and then basically streamline all of that. So we'll take a look at what that looks today. We've put some of the mass action stuff over on the agent server as well. So one thing that we're able to do by doing all of this work is overhaul the error handling and the debugging tools that we give you in order to investigate some of these things and look at improving them. So we're going to take a look at all of this stuff today and how this shakes out. For the most part, the workflows that you use to do redaction today will remain the same. The information that we present will be clearer. The way that you handle issues, bugs, debugging, or errors will be vastly improved. So we're pretty excited that we're able to try to get all of this fit in without forcing you guys to have to retrain everybody. So we're pretty excited on that front. So like I was mentioning, from the work product performance standpoint, we've offloaded manual spreadsheet markup operations off to the agent servers. So we're going to use your existing agent server to do this. The spreadsheet redaction action from a task perspective is incredibly quick. We're talking milliseconds. So in the event that a lot of these are stacking up, they get processed pretty quickly, and we'll show you kind of what that looks like. And then this really shakes out as one of our goals of giving this experience to reviewers to keep them moving. One thing that we've learned from a lot of you in working with your teams and working with reviewers is that reviewers felt compelled to have to refresh a lot, have to double check a lot. There is a bit of concern in, if I do this redaction, is it going on the document? And there's a lot of time waiting. So that time waiting is one of those things that we wanted to eliminate with this release. And on the other side of this, probably one of the most notorious bugs that most of you have run into before is an issue with file being in use. And this ultimately comes down to a situation where your web server is trying to get a hold of the file so they can save it to place a redaction on it, but then the conversion agent has it or some other system has it. That throws up a conflict. Your reviewer gets a really scary, nasty error. They contact your team. You guys aren't sure what to do with it. You come to us. We believe that this release will be eliminating that for the most part once and for all. So we're really excited about that. In the event that other bugs happen, other issues, you run into other errors, perhaps corrupted documents or document errors, we've introduced new debugging pages, the ability to retry redactions, both as an admin or as a case admin, and some new types of notifications that will be sent out as well. So I'm going to jump into a demo and present all of this new stuff. And just a couple notes about the demo. First, this is a pre-regression alpha build. So some of the design of some of these things we're actually working to fix right now. So the visual fidelity will be improved in some areas. I'm not going to show everything from this release. There's quite a bit of stuff. We will have the most important things in this demo. And we've made over 70 other changes that aren't a part of this as well. So that includes bug fixes, additional compatibility for different types of Excel files, and some security upgrades. And finally, probably most important, if you want to see this again or share it with your team, the webinar recording will be available on millilily.com later this week. So I'm going to jump over to my relativity environment. And I have logged into this environment and navigated out to a workspace where I have a couple of spreadsheets. So the very first thing we're going to take a look at is what the viewer experience looks like now that we are not kind of doing all of this work in a stopping way on the web server. So here I am on the none markup set. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our primary markup set. So this swaps, and probably the very first new thing you'll notice here is in the bottom right, is we have a bit of information about the last time the document saved and the current status. So because of this offloading process, this is now happening asynchronously. So a good way to think about this is that you go and you place a redaction. We save that action so that we know that that redaction, that work product was done. And then we tell the Blackout agent, place this redaction on the copy file or on the prepared file. So since that is not happening instantly and it's not happening on the web server, we are going to send that message back to the front end so that the reviewer can keep on redacting and they don't have to worry about refreshing the page. They don't have to worry about all of that kind of back and forth between the viewer and all of that stuff happening. So if I select a box here and right click, go back out, redact, we can see that it switches to processing very briefly. And then our last saved update is there as well. And if I click on this box, we can see that this is just where we're trying to kind of draw all of the status messages. So when things are progressing, when things are in a failed state, something goes wrong, this box here, this kind of message will give us information about what is taking place. So we've extended this same kind of paradigm throughout all of our review panel here. So as I go through these, we can see what other information's on here. And if I want to do something like redact the chart here, and click redact, goes into processing, this updates. We get some live feedback here on this. As I go through, you'll also notice that we've changed some of the UI here to give more information on each of these panes. So we'll go ahead and redact this social security number out of here, like so. Again, this is all happening real time. So these actions are very quick. Where we anticipate there being some time where it's on here a little bit longer is if you have a lot of people reviewing at once and this kind of stacks up, this may be present for a second or two. Kind of big changes on each of these tabs, things like the original comment, being able to get back to what the original text was. So we can see this was what it was before I redacted it. This is the redacted. And then if I want to make an additional change, I can open this up and we can say, get rid of Jack here. Again, this is always a forward operation. So we think this should help open up a little bit more of what was this beforehand, what will it be going forward. To kind of keep this the same across, we've updated each of these tabs to have that same paradigm. So when we go to headers and footers, all of your headers and footers will be listed here rather than having them split across 6 pages, kind of the same action. So this should simplify some of the training for new reviewers. You're always going to these pages, clicking the redact button. And finally, one other major change to kind of simplify some additional workflows, we've moved the sheet redaction into its own tab as well. So if you recall previous to this, you would have to navigate to the specific sheet and then click a button, get a new modal, put in the new sheet name. Now you can just come here and you can go down the whole list and knock out the manual redactions for any of the sheet names that you need. So here's an example. And we put some information about here what will happen because there is a unique requirement and a couple other naming requirements for sheet name. We're just going ahead and taking care of that here in this dialogue. So this was all jumping through pretty quickly. I put together another markup set that we can take a look at where what does it look like when it's processing. So if we have a markup set where this work is taking place and it's kind of stacking up on the agent and we're still moving through, there's no reason to wait for this. This is all going to eventually become consistent as those redactions are being placed. So we can see here that we're delivering a message to the reviewer. Markups are being applied. You can continue to place new markups. And once these get into the queue, they'll be placed on the copied file. The main thing here is that this work is always saved off. You can notice on the locations where this is taking place, we show specifically which markups are being applied by the agent still. So if you're in a blended situation where you've ran a project on this and that project has already placed all these redactions, those will be here. They will be able to be interacted with. The ones that are processing will be properly blocked. We can actually click on here and see right where that was, where I drew that box. And as I navigate through here, we can see like on our comments here, redacting. I think I have redacting. So the main reason we switched to this paradigm is to make sure that this is always delivering this information in a consistent way across the board. Now, if something goes wrong, we have a couple of different pieces indicating here about what's going on. So on our main page here, we can see which of our specific markups failed. In general, what we're trying to do is also create a system where we're protecting the reviewer in this case. So if we run into an issue like the Excel is corrupt, this failure will be bubbled up immediately, and then we let the user know that the markup failed. And historically, I believe in most cases we popped like an actual really scary like object error message, or sometimes even the file in use message like bubbled up to the user. So we're catching all of that now, and we're also expanding this with some debugging tools. So kind of the first thing that's going to happen here is we're going to prevent additional redactions from being placed on this so that this doesn't keep stacking up exceptions for the user. So the idea is you got the failure, you hit that. We are doing a couple other things now too. So one of the first of these is that when that error is hit, we have introduced a new optional configuration where you can have the exception emailed to a system administrator or a user or a set of defined email address. So this might be like your list support team being notified. It might be IT, where we send this information over to them. So I'll show you what that looks like real quick. And this is a sample of that email. So it's going to let you know what user in the system encountered it, what workspace they encountered it on, including artifact ID, what document it was along with the document ID, so control number, document ID, when it was, and the exception will be set to you. So this, in a lot of cases, because we're narrowing down some of the exceptions that can happen, we'll have specific KD articles and ways to kind of navigate some of this stuff as we build up that repository. Jumping back over, we'll go back into the workspace. Probably one of the kind of coolest changes here is that we've introduced a new manual failures tab. And this page is going to let you know, so you can come here and see which documents have encountered failures, how many markups there were, and we give you some pretty cool controls on what we can do with this. So in most cases, we anticipate the things that you're going to run into are going to be very specific. In a lot of those situations, you're going to need to work with our CA team in order to kind of work through these issues. So what we've done is this page here lets you kind of get to the document, see what user was working on it, see how many markups may have failed here, and then take a couple actions. If I download the errors here, this actually breaks out the specific exceptions that happen along with the debugging information that we would work with you on when we get on the phone with some of these. Each one of these will have the specific markup and document where that was. So we would be able to look at this, we'd be able to look at this markup, see what action was taken, and basically boil down exactly what happened. So this is not something that we're capable of doing today. So a lot of times when you get on the phone with our support team, we are digging, we are running a lot of SQL scripts and doing a lot of investigation to try to figure this stuff out. Super excited about this. We'll be able to narrow it down to the exact actions, the exact exceptions, and also kind of avoid some of that system log digging that we have to do today. Probably the most exciting part of this, though, is once we get through that debugging and we resolve the document error, we make that fix, all of that work product's still there. And we have the ability to retry it because we're not doing it on the web server anymore. So let's say that you call us, we get on, we figure it out that we got to patch Blackout. So we send you a new build, you update Blackout, then you come back to this page here and you just click retry. So this is going to requeue all of the work product that was already done for this document, put it back in, and then reapply those redactions. So this hopefully will allow us to identify issues, work through those issues, and then reapply all of that work product without having to lose additional time having reviewers go back, dig through the document again. This is going to be especially useful on really big documents, especially useful if this happens in multiple documents in a row, or if there's just lost time. The idea is that we can work through this, get all this work product reapplied, and not lose any of that effort. We also have a couple different BOMA options here. So if we were making a decision to move this document into external redactions, you just kind of want to blank it out, we can use this delete failed markups to clear that out. So this is just really, let's just reset this document type button. Probably won't be used, but there are some specific edge cases where this might make sense for us to advise you to use. So then throughout the whole system, we've introduced a lot of different checks to kind of be aware of the status of the document. So for example, on our external markups page, if we have a document that has failed markups, we basically just have a nice notification here letting you know, hey, these are your documents that have been flagged for external redaction that had failed markups. Just know that we're not going to try to burn those into the document when you download this. And then when you upload the document back, it will go ahead and clear those out for you. So when one of the workflows that we typically have with a lot of you when you encounter a problematic document is to flag it, put it through the external workflow. This is just a nice quick way to identify which ones those are. Some other places that I'm not going to jump into where we have made sure that we're aware of these is propagation. So if you attempt to run a propagation project and a document has failed markups as a part of it, we let you know that. Some other places that we're handling it is in the convert markup type. So if you have a situation where you've placed a bunch of redactions that are on a set, one of those documents has failed, we're going to convert those markups for you in our data model. So once that document's fixed and you go to reapply, it's going to reapply the converted type rather than the original type. So just trying to make sure that's convenient and not forcing you to keep track of all that like you'd have to today. All right, so that is a high level overview of all of these changes. So I definitely want to go ahead and leave some time here to answer questions over the next 5 to 7 minutes. If you have feedback or have any questions, definitely support@maroli.com, and you also can email me, tim@maroli.com, and I'm more than happy to answer any of these. So I do have a couple of questions coming in. I'll just kind of start at the top. So when this release comes out, automated migration upgrade compatible with relativity 1 redact, or will that be unavailable? So right now, through at least summer of next year, we are going to be first party testing the migration. During that time, we are most likely going to be working with relativity to figure out how to make that a little bit long-term tenable. Relativity redact won't have a lot of this functionality just yet. So we'll see exactly how they want to approach it, since the way that we're doing this would be a little bit different for them. But in terms of if you have a case that's on Blackout 4.2 and you need to arm and offload that case over into Relativity 1, we will ensure that migration path is not overly impacted if that's a workflow. So that's something that we talked about with Relativity just today during our weekly meeting with them. I got a question: what does offloading the work to agents mean for agent server requirements? Right now, through our testing, there should not be an additional requirement for your agent servers if you're kind of already following the 6 or the 8 default workers, 6 high resource workers per agent as kind of like a middle of the pack for your agent servers. We do have some additional testing that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks that involves some performance testing, just some stress testing. Right now, though, in most cases, you shouldn't need to increase your agent server that much. So, and I think like a good way to think about it too is that typically when you're putting an Excel project into the agent servers and we're redacting them, we're doing roughly 100 milliseconds per redaction. And since we're effectively the prepare step's only happening once still per markup set, that's the highest resource requirement that takes place as a part of the redaction process. The actual redaction after that should be super quick. So these do go through a priority queue, so they do get handled. The good way to think about it is that this work's not going to be prevented by your projects. It's going to be done in parallel. So yeah, the resource requirements stay pretty low. Are there any plans on supporting CSV files? Yes, there absolutely is plans on supporting CSV files. I don't have timing right now. Our next MI release, Blackout 4.2.1, will be later this year, and then 4.3 is going to focus on additional tools for the reviewer. So some things like find and redact, similar to find and replace, partial redacting for for spreadsheet, whereas partial redact for image projects, and some other things like that. CSV will most likely be sometime after that. It is high on our list though for 2022. So next question, is there capability to separate the projects and manage separate agents? There is not that capability yet. There's pretty significant infrastructure changes we have to make to how our queues and priority are managed right now to make that possible. One thing you will see in Blackout 4.2.1 is this idea of a fast lane. So it's going to be the ability to put a project through a single project at a time through a priority queue for emergencies. Use cases, if you have a long-running image project that's going to run overnight, and then you have an emergency spreadsheet project that's like 100 documents that has to go through, system administrators will be able to flag that spreadsheet project and push that through on priority and have that run while the image project's running. Throughout 2022, one of the threads that we'll explore is what does it take for us to kind of get into that space where we can entertain additional prioritization, additional queue management, and then additional agent server management. But since that is a very structural change to our agent system, we don't have the specifics on how that'll be possible just yet. Cool. That was the last question I have on my list. Just give another minute for any other questions. Yeah, so actually there's a question, is there any plans for a mass retry on the manual failures page? So mass retry was a part of the original design. One of the things that we wanted to do to kind of expedite getting this release out there and tested is kind of take a little bit more MVP approach and actually see if the exception growth is required, I guess, sprawling enough to require that. Since the mass retry would be kind of a big dump of additional items at once, it has different requirements for performance. So our idea right now is, because unequivocally across the board, the biggest manual failure that we see is the conflict between the web server and the conversion agent, and we believe that this release eliminates that. The number of failures that should continue from manual redaction after this should be very low. So right now, we kind of wanted to take a more piecemeal approach, get this functionality out there, and then if we see that there end up being a lot of workflows that demand mass retry, it's something that we would look to bring back into the application. Awesome. I think that is the last question. Of course, if you guys have any questions at all, or anything for me, or even want to provide any feedback, or have anything that comes up in half hour from now, just shoot me an email, tim@malloy.com. I'm happy to answer anything that you have or answer any questions that you have, and then I will make sure that your account manager is updated of when that comes through, whether it's Jeffrey or Micah. So again, thank you all so much for joining today, getting a preview. I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards, so definitely reach out, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.